Okay, we get started. I call this meeting in the Red Oak Independent School District to order at 6:30 PM. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and the notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. All board members are present at this time. Mr. Knight, would you lead us in invocation, please?
Ms. Bell. Father, we just thank you for allowing us to come here tonight. Together like this, Father, talk about the business of the school here. And Father, all things we just bring before you, Father, that we can honor you in everything that we do. Father, that our children, our our students and staff, and everyone involved, our admin, I just pray that you're with each and every one of them. Father, as our seniors have moved on, Father, we have a new group coming in. Father, that we just ask that you watch over these young folks as they're coming into the senior year to figure out what they're going to do in life, Father. But we have those beyond that, Father. We have all the way to our little ones. Father, it's just a blessing you've given us here. Let our oversight be with wisdom and knowledge, Father, that we can make decisions based upon what you would have us to do. Father, we thank you for all things. Oh, Lord Jesus, amen.
Would you rise and, as Ms. Porter leads us in our pledges, please?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, we're going to move into our public hearing discussion of budget and proposed tax rate for fiscal year 2022, 2023. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. What we're here, the Texas Code requires that we have a public hearing before you adopt a budget every year. So that's what we're here to do, the public hearing on the budget. We're not here tonight to talk about the tax rate because under the new state statutes that came into effect in 2019, school districts can't adopt a tax rate until after the certified property values come out at the end of July. So we have an estimated tax rate in here, but we don't have the official adoption of the tax rate. And as the last several years, we didn't do that until August of every year. Tonight, we're going to talk about the budget development, what the actual budget looks like for the adoption that we're going to ask the board to do later tonight. Also have a discussion on the property values. There's several different types of property values that are used in the state, and we need to share that with you. And then talk about the next steps. The overall budget development, as in most budgets, are based on some sort of strategic plan. So in our case, it's based on the Flight Plan 2023, which was developed a number of years ago. The budget's been prepared in accordance with district policy, and it also conforms to the TEA requirements. Both the revenues and expenditures have been reviewed internally by the board as well as by the administration, and it's based on data elements available at this time. The unfortunate thing about some of the things that take place here in the Texas state aid formula is we don't have a lot of known factors, and so there's estimates. The development process was shared with the board in January, how we were going to go through the process. We met with all the budget managers, mainly the principals and department heads in February, to see how this year's budget is going, as well as preparing them for the 22-23 budget development process. We asked them to provide us their budgets. We gave them that information in February. The campus budgets are based on a per pupil. So it's based on a flat dollar amount for every student in that campus. So that's a way to be comparable with campus to campus based on the student enrollment. And the department budgets are based on the prior year with any changes that may have been one-time kind of expenses, either added or removed. We provided the board an update in April. We got our estimated preliminary certified property values from the Ellis Appraisal District on May 2nd, and it was an initial 18.84% increase over last year. And I'm sure all of y'all that have property have seen when y'all got your tax information, you saw that it went up pretty significantly too. We won't provide an adopted tax rate. It won't be presented to the board until August or September. Again, we have to wait till after we get the certified property values at the end of July. Right now, we're proposing a tax rate for the maintenance and operations of 0.9429, which is a 1.81% decrease over the prior year. And also the INS, interest and sinking tax rate, which is the debt service tax rate, that's going to remain the same at 0.3653, which is what it was this year as well. Again, we won't know what that is until the TEA gives us what our rate will be at the end of July. The revenue assumptions. The revenue assumptions consist of average daily attendance of our students. It's not so much enrollment, it's how often are they here on a daily basis. We're estimating a 315 student increase over the 21-22 budget. And the main way we came up with that is over the last 4 or 5 years, our average daily attendance is roughly around 95% of the enrollment. So we took what we project the enrollment to be next year and multiplied that by 95%, and it gave us the number that we have for the ADA. And again, the enrollment for the October 21 was 6296. We're anticipating the enrollment for next October 2022, to be 6580 is what we're projecting, roughly 285 student increase over what it was this October. For all the other, again, the funding formula is very, very complicated, and there's some additional allocations, and we're anticipating a 3% increase in the participation in those additional allocations. And one of the reasons I compared what we budgeted this year and what the final numbers pretty much match that, so we just used 3%. Again, due to the projected increase in the comptroller's property values from when we presented in April, projecting to have lower state funding. We are projecting roughly around 1.4 million increase in state funding, mainly due to the increase in enrollment, but now we're only projecting around 965,000 increase in the state funding. And mainly it's because of the state's property values, what they determine the property values. And I'll get more into that in a little while. But that's why it appears that our state funding component will be going down a little bit. Also on the revenue side, 2 years ago, or last year, actually 2021, which essentially was 2 years ago, we received additional money because we are a fast growth district. The state changed that formula this last year, and we did not get it in the 21-22 school year, but we're projected to get it next year. They've changed it to where it's over a 6-year period, where before it was a 3-year period. And while we got 1.45 million, we're only expecting 272,000 this year. So it's not a lot, but we're still getting some additional funding as a result of that. Current tax collections, we're projecting that to be 13%. As I said, the preliminary estimate came in at 18.84%, but that was before the change in the homestead exemption, as well as all the protests that are occurring. So I'm being conservative and saying it's going to be about a 13%, but we won't know that number until after the 25th of July. And again, the tax rate is what I already mentioned, 0.9429 is what we're projecting it to be. The collections, we're projecting that to be 99%. And I have a slide here at the end which shows we've essentially gone roughly around 101, 102% collection over the last couple of years. And the state's going to increase, because we're having salary increases, the state's going to increase our TRS pension repayment, what they call the on-behalf payments. On the expenditure side, and we shared this with the board back in April as well is we're going to do on the teacher's pay scale, increase that by $1,000. For the auxiliary and paraprofessionals or the non-exempt, a 6% increase of the midpoint. And for the professional staff, a 3% increase on the midpoint. And as always, we'll continue to review the pay plans to make sure that every pay plan is comparable with our neighboring districts. And we'll continue to do that. If we find any discrepancies, then we'll bring that to the board at some point in the fall. Also, we shared this with the board too, position increases, which are in the budget. 4 elementary positions, mainly due to student growth. We know we're also required to have full-day kindergarten programs, and we have right now 2 half-days, which we need to convert into 1 full day. So we're projecting additional teacher and additional para for that. Again, a lot of that will be based on the anticipated students that we're planning to have. Then special education program, 3 teachers at the elementary schools, 2 diagnosticians at the due to caseloads, and then a 0.5 speech language therapist. We have a 0.5. We want to make that a 1 FTE. Then at the middle school, 3 additional elective teachers, and we're adding to the DAP as well a teacher as well as a 0.5 counselor. And the middle school will receive a 0.5 counselor as well. Other positions, adding a fine arts director and then an additional assistant principal at the middle school. One of the things we've also shared with the board is we've increased our health insurance premium. The district has a component of the health insurance premium. We've increased that this year. So every individual that's part of the health plan will benefit from this. We've increased the local leave days and changed the retirement package to make it more incentive for individuals to stay with us and retire with Red Oak as opposed to going somewhere else. We had an increase in the property and liability insurance due to the market conditions. I was anticipating only about a $41,000 increase. It ended up being a $70,000 increase. And then we're projecting a decrease in our utility bills. We've implemented various LED light situations in various schools over the last several years. So that's helping us reduce our utility costs. And we got last week the Ellis CAD, which does the tax collections for Ellis County. They've increased their costs for next year. So that was a new addition that hasn't been shared with the board. So now the budget that we're going to ask the board to adopt. Again, there's 3 funds that the board is required to approve: the general fund, student nutrition, as well as debt service. And as you see, the general fund is a balanced budget. Student nutrition isn't balanced at this moment, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a few seconds. The debt service fund has a positive revenue over expenditures, and that's mainly due to help us pay down debt down the road. On the general fund, comparing adopted budget that we'll ask the board to adopt to the most current 21-22 budget, shows a 4.6 million dollar increase, again primarily in the local taxes and then the 945 in the state. On the expenditure side, it's done by function. You have instructional functions, you have operational functions, you have plant, general administration, data processing, debt service, community services. The community services is going down because over the last several years we've reduced the number of staff we have at our Little Hawks program, which is a program which is a benefit for those employees that have small children that want to come work in Red Oak. Also, the debt service, we reduced that a little bit, which is in the general fund. And the facilities acquisition and construction, that was built up this last year because we bought the middle school property west of I-35. So we've already purchased that, so we don't have to budget for that. That's why that's gone down. Then the other governmental costs, that's the increase to the Ellis CAD. So roughly our general fund revenue, our local is roughly 40%. Our state funding is 55.5%. So we still get the majority of our revenue from the state, not from property taxes. And then on the expenditure side, we have roughly 83.5% of the budget is for staffing costs. And the average usually is from 80 to 85%. Most districts, we're kind of right in the middle of that. So we're not on the high end, but we're also not on the low end of that. And then roughly, these are broken down by the functions. We have roughly 75% of our budget going towards the education, the actual direct education of students. And a lot of these on the bottom are those instructional kind of functions. And I have a slide here in a minute which will break it down too. Here's the fund balance history. For some reason, Red Oak had a required fund balance of 12.5%. The state had a recommended fund balance of 25%. So the pink line is what Red Oak had. The green line is what the state recommended. This year, we said the district should be at 25% as well. So we increased it. That's why the big increase. So roughly, our fund balance is a little over the 25%, projecting it to be like 29% at the end of this year as well as next year. So that's just to show that we're slightly above what the state recommended we have as a fund balance. So again, a slide I've used in the past is where, if somebody asks you, where does the district's dollar goes? $1, 71% goes towards teaching, transporting, supervising, and counseling students. 5 cents goes towards library materials, staff training, and curriculum development, again for the benefit of the students. 13 cents goes towards securing, operating, and maintaining facilities. Again, that's mainly for the benefit of the students. And then 11% goes towards the central office, technology, and community services. So now the student nutrition. This year, or the last several years, have been unique, but this year the federal government decided to say students don't have to pay for lunch. They did the summer seamless option. So all students were able to eat free. What the federal government also did is they increased what the allocation or the reimbursement. So every meal we served to a student, we gave that data to the federal government and they gave us money on behalf. So they increased that number. So we had a lot more revenue come in than we were projecting. And we have a fund balance in student nutrition projected, again, we're not at the end of the fiscal year yet, about $1.4 million. The federal government says you can only have 3 months of fund balance. So we are projecting to use an additional $1 million of that fund balance to upgrade and to replace some of the kitchen equipment and information and different equipment in the cafeterias to make them more compliant. So it's not being spent unwisely, it's just to upgrade the current kitchen material and cafeteria stuff. So, and this is the breakdown of that. So you see under the 22-23, we have $1 million more expenditure than revenue. And it's to take down that fund balance so we're staying in compliance with what the federal government has dictated as far as fund balance. So here's a breakdown. Unfortunately, it is skewed because that additional $1 million is going to be over in supplies and materials and contracted services. So it looks like salary and benefits are only, it shows only 41%. Reality, it's more in the 80% under the normal circumstances. On the debt service, last year we repaid some 2020 bonds. In August, we're able to pay off some 2013 bonds, and so we're doing that as well. So that's why we're showing roughly $10 million of expenditures when normally it's like $7 million, $7.5 million. But again, we're able to pay this debt off. We have the fund balance, so we're able to do that. And so the goal is to take down our outstanding debt. So here's the fund balance of the debt service. And right now we're roughly projecting to be at the end of this year around $6.4 million fund balance. So now some additional budget data. Here's some things I'm just going to quickly go over. Student enrollment. This is a projection over the next 5 years of student enrollment. Again, the big change here in 2019-2020, we had 6,067. But when 2020-21 hit, that's the first year of COVID, it went down to 6,001. This year, we're projecting it to go to 6269, but it actually went up to 6296, so it's a little higher than what we projected. And then next year, we're projecting it to be 6580. And then the next light blue of the next 4 years are projections. These are our projections based off of some data provided by the demographer, but it's not their numbers, it's our numbers. Essentially took their projections and applied it to our actual October 2021 enrollment. So average daily attendance, again, this is the actual number of students, and projecting 6251. Again, we're projecting 5936 is what was projected for this year, 5927, so it was pretty close to what was projected this year. And then the weighted average daily attendance, this is another component that the state provides. The ADA, the 6251 times 6160, because the per student or per ADA is $6,160 per ADA is what the funding is. Then on top of that, the state does give those additional allocations for special education, early education, dyslexia. So you add up all those additional allocations to the 6160, then so you get a dollar amount, divide that by 6160, and so they're saying our weighted ADA is 8466. It's confusing, but they had some formula to come up with this stuff to make it for the total funding formula. So the revenue per WADA, again, going back to that weighted, is 7323. So essentially, if 6160 is the amount of money we get per student, we're actually getting 7323. So the additional special allotments are adding up to that 7323. The taxable values, we're projecting it, the 21 taxable values were $2.7 billion, projecting 3.1. That's a 13% increase. Again, the state or the CAD's initial projection was 18.84. I'm budgeting only a 13% increase. And here's a sheet showing the estimated tax revenue. Again, for the M&O, $27.3 million. And then tax collection history, as I said, in year ending June 30, 2020, we had just almost 101% collection. Last year, 2 years ago, 104.88% collection. This year, we're projecting, as of May 31st, 102.81% collection. The tax rate, this shows that we were at $1.17 for many years. Then over the last 4 years, the tax rates have gone down for the M&O. Same thing with here's a tax rate of both INS and M&O, but the INS tax rates have gone down as well. We've dropped them from 37 to 36.5%. And then this is data from a year ago, because we won't know this data until after we get the certified values in July. But here's the top 10 taxpayers in the school district. Now, the final thing is a discussion on property values. As part of the first rating, the financial ratings that the school districts in Texas get, they want the districts to share with the board and the community the two types of property values. There is the locally certified property values, then there's the state certified property values. The locally certified property values, they're determined by the county appraisal district, the Ellis CAD, and then they're used to project the tax collections for each budgeted year, and they're provided annually to the school districts. And the official certification isn't until the end of July, as I've mentioned that several times. Again, but it's based on the prior January, so what we get on the 25th of July is property value as of January 1st, 2022. Now the state certified property values. Again, there are around 250 some odd counties in the state. And so each of them may evaluate property a little differently. So what the state does through the comptroller's office is they try to ensure and verify or audit that what each individual CAD, how they value their property, is consistent statewide. So their goal is to ensure equitable distribution of state funding, as well as a means to measure the performance of the CAD. The unfortunate thing is they only do their projections every 2 years instead of every year. So, and it's more of a survey instead of actual evaluating all the properties. And again, the main thing is it estimates the school district's taxable property values for the foundation school program. So as part, and I have a slide here I'll show you in a minute too. But instead of using the local property values, they use the state values as part of our funding formula. So again, the main reason I share this slide with you is before 2019, they had the state property values was always a year behind. So if your property values were growing and you were a year behind, it looked like you weren't as wealthy, so you got more state aid. Then they changed it to where, likewise, if it was going down, you looked like you were more wealthy. The reason they changed it was to make it more current, but the downside of that is, again, we adopt the budget, the board will hopefully adopt it tonight, but we won't know what that number is for this budget year until next January. So we're just guessing what that is. So by them going a year behind, they would already know what that value is to make it easier for school districts to determine. Because, as this slide shows you, as the local share increases, which is that state property value, the amount of state funding you get goes down. So if that's higher, then the state funding goes down. So that goes back when I was projecting, early on when I said we were projecting 1.4 million for state aid. That was using an 11% estimate of the property values, the state property values. When we got that 18.84, I bumped it up to 14%. And so then that took down to 945 of state funding. So and here's the chart, which the top line up here is the local property values. Then this is what the state property values are. And I circled these two because this is the last year that it was a year behind. So next year when we do this, we won't have to worry about a year being behind. So the actual 18 was 1.789 billion, but what they used in the formula was 1.635 billion. Then it jumped from the 1.6 up to the $2 million or $2 billion. So again, this is just show that our local property values are a little higher, and as long as you're within 5% of what the state's values are, you're okay. But if you go above 5%, then they will come in and do an audit and reduce from that the Ellis County CAD. So that's essentially it. The next steps, ask the board to adopt the budget tonight. Can you continue to monitor the current year budget to actual revenues just to make sure there's no outliers that come in that would impact next year's budget? Adopt the final tax rate in August or September, depending on when we get that. The goal is for them to give it to us July 25th. Several years ago, it was not until the middle of August. So then the state statute says you have 60 days from the date you get it to adopt the tax rate. Then continue to monitor the activities related to any changes in the state budget. Don't really anticipate that right now, but something may come up, but we just have to monitor that. And so that's essentially it. I don't know if there's any questions, but I know there's the opportunity to speak to. Yes, sir?
Your tax rate, your numbers, I guess, are based on a lot of the new bill here.
Yes.
Does anybody know the actual number of new houses, new businesses here? Numbers off of?
Yeah, I do not. No, sir. I know that the city had provided some information to us in a presentation, which should still be on our website, from the bond committee. And it was quite a, I can't remember, it was 250 a year, new housing or something like that over the next 4 or 5 years. But yeah. But again, most homeowners, their property value, taxable property value, can only increase by 10%. So if it's, as you're alluding to, if it's almost 19%, it's either new commercial property or a bunch of new housing going in to cause it to go up. Yes, sir.
banks that are having to sell their house and move out because they can't afford their house. Tax.
Yes. Yep. Yes, ma'am. If you have the homestead exemption, then the cap is 10% per year. But if you have, let's say, multiple properties, you only can have the homestead exemption on one of those properties. But you have to make sure that you've applied for that homestead exemption at some point in the past to get that. Yes, ma'am. I mean, the whole market value may have gone up, but the taxable component or that could only go up 10%.
Texas. Where do you find what the state of Texas is assessing? I mean, I can look up at
On the
RIA
comptroller's website,
on the comptroller's website.
and they call it property value study. And they have it broken down by the type of municipality, which would be a school district, and then by each county. So if you wanted to look and see what each individual school district or county would be, you do that.
Is your presentation here available for us to view after this meeting?
It should be. I can't remember exactly how. We'll put it. It's going to be on the website as well.
Okay. Because there's a lot of numbers and
Yes.
it'd be nice to
Yes.
analyze those.
Okay.
We'll post it on the website first thing tomorrow morning. You're welcome.
You responded that the tax rate is not going to be finalized until sometime after August or whatever, right?
Hopefully at the August school board meeting. Yes, sir.
Okay, so will there be a hearing about determining the rate prior to that time?
We did one last year. State statute says if your tax rate is what, and we put a projected number out here on the notice. If it's high, that or lower, you don't have to necessarily have another public hearing. You have to have a public hearing if it's higher. We will probably have, I want to make sure the information is out there. So we did one last year, and more than likely I'll have one done again this year for that, just to make sure the information is out there. Because it's very, also in the 2019, they added several different components. We have to share what's a no new revenue, as well as a voter approved tax rate. And just, those are confusing. So last year what I did is we had that special hearing just to explain what all that is. So,
Dr.
Yeah,
Johnson?
the change in the laws made it a little bit more
Yes.
confusing.
Yeah, so we always do or we have done in the past, a public hearing before we set the tax rate, and we'll do that again.
Yes, sir. This year is such a bad year with the fuel and everything. And it's for those of us who are on fixed income.
well, thank y'all very much.
Is that all the questions? I know some signed up for this, but this is different than, this is opportunity to ask whatever question for Dr. Johnston, so.
I'm kind of wondering, so if your house doubles in value, the new tax rate is going to be applied to that double price, and then the IRS or whoever does that can go ahead and add 10% more to that?
No, ma'am.
Does that make sense?
No, let's say your house was valued at $100,000 last year, but the market value doubled, so it went up to $200,000 this year. If you have that homestead exemption, the most it can go up is the assessed value or the taxable value can only go up 10%. So the taxable value should be at $110,000, even though the market value may be $200,000. And it's very confusing because you see that $200,000 and you think that then whatever their market value is more than likely what their assessed value if they don't have that done.
I'm on your way, ma'am. Hang on one second.
So tonight you're going to adopt the budget, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So tell me what happens between now and the when you get the information from the
Mhm.
state on your proposed tax rate, is it going to go, would it go down? Would it go up?
It will not go up because we're already at the
You're at
lowest.
the maximum
We're at the lowest there is.
without a vote. You're at
Without
the
a vote.
maximum without a vote.
Yes.
So what happens most likely? I don't understand how you can adopt a budget and not know. I know you have to.
Well, we have an estimate of what, I mean, right now, we don't know what that taxable certified value is going to be. And that's the main
So
factor
is
of
the
this.
difference that the state comes back usually is never material? Is that
Well,
how you can do that?
I'm being conservative in what I'm estimating the certified value will be.
Okay.
And if it comes in lower than that, then we may have to come back to the board and say we need to reduce the overall budget because we're going to not anticipate getting.
So you can, you
can-
would
yes.
do that?
Yeah, and part
Okay.
of what I had in here, adopt the 2022 tax rate may also require a budget amendment.
Oh, okay.
If, I may not have said that a minute ago,
Okay.
so I apologize.
Hi, I'm new. I've only been here for a year and a half. This is my first time to come to the meeting. And I'm sorry, but I missed your name.
Bill Johnston,
Bill Johnston. Okay, and what is your position?
CFO.
CFO. All right, was this something that you created?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I wanted to discuss the tax rate and based on what I've examined in your figures here. Are we going to be able to do that?
Yeah, I can certainly visit with you about that.
Okay, but I thought it was a public forum where we're going to discuss with the school board about it.
I mean,
What's your questions?
What is my question?
You have a
Um,
question. This is why we're here.
Okay,
Ask your
well, I
questions.
didn't know if we were going to get to a public forum. I asked to speak about it.
That's different. That's after we finish this part. We'll do open forum.
Okay, well, that's what I was asking. I didn't know how we were moving along. All right, thank you.
okay.
Well, it wasn't just necessarily a question. It was just my opinion based on this information of where we should go. I
Okay.
mean, it's just a input, actually.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
Is anybody else? If not, we'll move into open forum then. We have everybody? Next, we're going to move into open forum. This is public comment session of our agenda. The board welcomes comments from citizens who have completed public comment forms this evening, which are accepted prior to the start of the meeting and not transferable to other speakers. Please be advised that the information shared in public comment is the opinion of the individual speaker, not the district. 2 minutes per person have been allotted for public comments. There'll be a clock up on the screen behind me. Please keep all public comments related to school district governance and operations. If you have a specific concern related to the employee of the district or a specific student issue, you are encouraged to utilize the district's grievance procedures provided in board policies on the district website. Finally, remember that the board may not discuss or act upon any issues that are not properly posted on the agenda. When I call your name, please step up to the podium and state your name. Mr. John Wilhite.
I'm John Wilhite. I've been a resident of Red Oak for almost 35 years. 2 sons that have graduated from here and gone on and have families now. The thing that concerns me, but you kind of said there's no discussion on the tax rate. You've got the value in the school district has gone up almost 20%. And you're projecting, it looks like, and again, I'm not always sure I understand this stuff, from, where was it? Where did it go? The rate of, proposed rate is 0.36530. Correct? That's what it is on your page. Okay. And I believe last year or something was less than that. So it is an increase. If we're going up and you've got almost a 20% increase in property valuation added to it for the new stuff, and not even including what the county, the Central Appraisal District is going to do, because everybody I've talked to says they're getting 10% up on property, especially commercial property and stuff. You got a windfall here. Why aren't we not considering, because of the economy and the way the everything is going for everybody? I mean, everybody, you guys are getting hit with fuel bills. So we need to take and be considerate of the people that live here. So the rate, I mean, somewhere between it, I don't know. I don't know. But I'm not in the education business. And by the way, thank you for serving. I'm a veteran and I served in Vietnam. So thank you very much. And just, we need help. And I know you need help, but somewhere in between, hopefully we can find a spot that we can all come together happily.
Thank you for your service. Mr. Don Griffin?
Good evening. Thank
Evening.
y'all for having a meeting, and we appreciate your service for the district. I'd just like to read something here for the record. Consideration of the budget and property tax rate. I hope you'll look at both sides of the equation, revenue and expenditures. Let's look at revenue first. Red Oak does not need a higher tax rate. Basically, you have enough revenue by using the same rate you used last year. There should be no new revenue tax rate. The rate you have will now cover M&O expenditures. Let's look at those expenditures. Having to live on a budget, I have to cut down or do away with some expenditures. There are expenses in your budget that could be cut completely and not affect the academic training of students. I believe that this board should reconsider their responsibilities as fiduciary managers of public tax money. In summary, taxpayers are living in tough times, as we all are. Gasoline prices higher, food prices higher, high everything prices. Let's get down to reality and focus on the job you were elected to do. Manage the taxpayers' money and not go for new bonds, which is debt, but live within the revenue that you have to work with. No new revenue tax. We're watching your performance and the actions you take. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Creighton?
Hi, Brian Creighton. Live at 430 Country Ridge Lane in Red Oak. I'm a newbie, first time here. Been here about a year and a half. I want to ask y'all to, as been said before and will be said later, that these are unique times, that we've got inflation, we've got high fuel bills, high grocery bills, and so we're all being pinched and asked to, or required to reduce our expenditures, or at least watch our spending. And I ask y'all to do the same. That I want y'all to adopt a rate that will maintain the same level of M&O revenue and pay the debt service. I want y'all to know that we are new to Red Oak, but we love Red Oak and we want to get involved with Red Oak. And in fact, some of us are going to be running for school board. And just let you know that if we're watching our bottom line, we're watching y'all's. Thank y'all. I appreciate your service.
Thank you. Miss Rebecca, great.
Rebecca Creighton, and we are newbies. We've been here about a year and a half. We've fallen in love with Red Oak. I'm here to get educated on the budget, which Dr. Johnson did a great job with that. And I'm also here to voice my opposition to the proposed tax rate that he referred to. The proposed tax rate would increase the amount we personally pay in property tax to the independent school district over $1,800 a year. And that's basically based on the tax, our property taxes, property value. So that's $150 a month out of our pocketbook that would be taken out of our gas. We're having to cut for gas. We're having to cut for food. But that rate is asking for $150 a month more from my pocketbook. So during this economic crisis, I think most of us are having to cut costs. I would ask you guys to consider doing the same. The voters of Red Oak recently voiced their opinion of additional spending by voting down the bond package. Please don't forget that. Hear their voice. It does matter. I ask that the board take a pause on additional increases to your taxpayers and adopt the rate to maintain same level of maintenance and operations revenue and pay debt service. At this rate, the ISD will be getting over $1,200 a year from us, just us, based on that rate, based on our property value that's gone up over a year and a half. To be clear, the increase in the property values, the majority of taxpayers in the Red Oak ISD will be taking more out of their pocketbooks for the education of our children, even without your proposed level of increase. Let's tighten our financial belts during this time and see how expenses might be reallocated to better serve our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Starman?
Hi, my name is Kim Sturman, and I moved here about a year and a half ago. I live at 201 Methodist Street. I love my new house, but it went up almost double in price because it's an old house, and I knew that was coming. When I look at the figures that Mr. Johnston has done for us, I see that the average increase of homes was $60,000 a year, which roughly estimated runs to about $800 increase a year for everyone across the board. That's on average. And that was last year. So our increase in the revenue and also the expanding growth of this city is based on his figures, I calculate about $10 million a year extra revenue for the Red Oak Independent School District. So I do appreciate the fact that the tax rate last year was 1.33 and the projected rate now or proposed rate is 1.31. But if it only takes 1.24 to maintain when we're going through such hard economic times, I would recommend that. I'm new. I was on the Nextdoor app and I saw the remarks of citizens out here about the bond and people were mad. They're like, golly gee, our taxes have gone skyrocketing and here we are, they're asking us to pay more. So I had this idea of less is more, and less is more is a good idea today. And why it is a good idea is because y'all would end up on the evening news. If y'all just maintained the tax rate that you need, which is 1.24 cents, y'all would be on the evening news. We'd see to that. Also, citizens, you would show care for their family because of the hard times we are all going through with 8% inflation and $5 gas, etc. I think it would really help to draw the community together, and I think people would be impressed with this school board to have a heart for the community, which would also help the children. And so if you had a lower tax rate, you could actually go back and ask for that bond that you need for schools, for your building new schools and new classrooms. And I think the people would be much more receptive to that. Just we ask you to have a heart.
Thank you. Lone Diver? Can you? Okay. I understand. Can you come to the podium? Okay, thank you. Ann Griffin?
Good evening. I appreciate what you guys do. And before my time starts, I just want to mention that I am going to mention tax rates because they were on the sheet that was put out on by the notice of this meeting. So I understand we're not voting on that now, but I do want to mention that. Okay. My chief, I'm sorry, I actually am a 28-year resident of Red Oak, and I'm also a retired 23-year veteran teacher. My chief purpose is to state that I am in opposition to the proposed tax rate that was published in the recent document. There's some numbers there that make sense to me. There was a number that talked about what is required to maintain the present status, and there was a proposed number for what you're asking for the future. If you look at the difference in those based on the or the taxable property values that are on that sheet, that's talking about an increase of over $2.5 million. I don't think the residents of Red Oak need to have to be asked to bear that at this point in time. Our families are in dire straits. They're trying to pay for fuel, groceries, and energy to maintain households. They're making cuts in those goods and services that they called necessary. We're asking the school board to consider that and do the same thing with your budgets that we have to do. And there's one more aspect of this request, and it has to do with the fact that we have to look at budget. I understand budget cuts are inevitable when you have to start making cuts anywhere. They're not easy to do. But just as individuals have to make difficult decisions into what areas they're going to cut their budgets, we're asking the district to do that also. I appeal to you to look carefully at every possible way to do this. There are no sacred cows here in the budget except those that directly affect the academic mastery of our students, and only those budget items that yield responsible students who can demonstrate academic success in the core subject areas of math, reading, writing, science, and non-revised history are the things that need to be prioritized. The rest of these things are up on the chopping block to be looked at. I ask you to do that carefully for this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Carter Gaddis?
Good evening. My name's Carter Gaddis. Members of the school board, it's all about money. Twice you tried to pass a bond election and you didn't listen to us. Twice we killed it. You need to bring us in. You listen to our message. We do not agree with your spending. You want us to spend more now when inflation is here and prices are soaring for everything. You have buildings available for more classrooms and you don't use them. You need to be more open to the public, the taxpayers, the voters. When you want to get set up things for these bonds, ask us. Get our input. Again, we have shown that we can make a difference. Maybe we can make a difference when individual elections come up. But you're in a daycare business and you shouldn't be. Shackelford isn't good enough for classes, but it's good to be a daycare center. Sell the property. It's on prime property right there on Ovilla Road. Use that money to build that middle school out there without even raising taxes. You've already made the money right there. I tell you, we want no new revenue tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Foster? Mr. Foster?
Good evening. My name's Bill Foster, 33-year resident of Red Oak. Both my kids graduated from school here. I support the no new revenue tax rate, given the economic straits facing the people of Red Oak and our nation. I think the Federals are telling us it's 8%. I always giggle about that. I was trained as an economist. It's, according to SeattleStats.com, we're facing 20%. It's going to get worse. We're only seeing the beginnings of this financial tsunami. The proposed tax rate seems to be the absolute maximum tax increase allowed by state law. I question the need for this $2.5 million windfall or bird's nest on the ground in y'all's lap. I'm willing to go in between, even though my primary is a no new tax rate. But I feel like you're scamming me again with maxing it out the credit cards. You know, there's a lot of guys here in this room that, you know, they've got ex-wives that did that kind of stuff. You guys are not ex-wives, okay? You understand? Okay. You should know by now that you've lost the trust of Red Oak's taxpayers given the recent defeat of your school bond election when it's well known we need a new middle school. And boy, we need a new middle school. Please sharpen your pencils better. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our open forum. We have nothing else to talk about in this session. Time is 7:26 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.